Our podcast was defrauded. We were stolen from. Just between talking with folks, there's up to $4 million that I know of that people were taking advantage of. We're in the six figures. I know of podcasts that are in the seven figures.
That Fighter and the Kid was owed somewhere around $476,000. Then I find out that Thick Boy Productions overall is owed around $1.6 million. I don't know.
You've probably heard the rumblings already, but there's a man who's been going around scamming what seems like every podcaster under the sun. This man's name is Colin Thompson. Colin allegedly defrauded upwards of $4 million from various different podcasters, including Theo, Jim Cornette, Brendan Schaub, and I imagine many more. And well, what does Bappa do when he gets stolen from? He goes and signs with the same guy again.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
A couple months ago, I made a video about this exact situation when Jim Cornette released an episode detailing how Cass was scamming his podcast. During that video, I made this statement. I'm not a betting man, but I will bet against Mr. Schaub and say that he probably took the worthless stock deal. And guess what, Bapacitos? I was dead right. But don't let me get ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning and have Colin explain the relationship between the entertainment giant known as Thick Boy Productions and Cass Media.
Our advertising agent was Cass Media. Colin Thompson, who owns Cass, was making us money. The way it would work was typically every 3 months, we'd get a large chunk of money. And that was always the way it was until probably months went by when we were getting what we call our minimum guarantee to keep the lights on per employee.
8 months without those big lump sums.
This was a common story amongst other podcasters that were under Cass Media. To sum it up, Cass would act as the middleman between podcasts and advertisers. Cass would find the advertisers, the podcasters would do the ad reads, the advertisers would pay Cass, and then Cass would turn around and pay the podcasts. Until they stopped doing that last step. Now, where Brenda's story starts to differ is what happened after he was scammed. First point of note is how long it took Bappa's team to figure out they weren't getting paid. Jim Cornette mentioned how they knew right away and they were always on top of Colin for their payments, which was a similar story to Theo. But Brenda over here hired some flunked out accountants that didn't even know they were missing payments, let alone know the full amount they were owed until it was far too late and they had accrued over $1.6 million in missing payments.
So what I find out from my accountant, your accountant, we share the same accountants, was that Fighter and the Kid was owed somewhere around $476,000. Then I find out that Thick Boy Productions overall is owed around $1.6 million.
Other podcasts said they didn't receive money, and obviously Theo didn't receive money. No one got more screwed over than I did.
Not even close.
Notice how he says he's fired his accountants? He later goes on to talk about the monster team he's hired around him now, which I suspect is at the same level of those monster lawyers he hired to sue Bobby Lee. But I digress. So at this point, Cuck Callan decides to take things into his own hands and calls Colin himself.
So at the end of the day, I called Colin, and I'm just going to tell you what the conversation was with Colin. Essentially, I started talking to him and I stopped him and I said, Colin, it sounds like you got in over your skis. There was a lull in advertising revenue. You started using our money to pay your payroll. And he said, that's basically what happened. And then there was talk of him selling his company to PodcastOne. And I said, where is that deal? And I heard a couple of things and I hung up the phone. I called you and I said, we're not going to see our money and that sale's not going to go through. And what I did at that point is I went on vacation.
You did?
I wonder why he didn't just threaten to beat up Colin like he did Bobby. Oh, that's because he's a little bitch who talks a big game, but when he's out $500,000, he just goes on vacation to forget about it and leaves the marketing genius, Mr. Schaub, to figure out what to do. And that went about as redacted as you'd expect.
Brennan spoke to, and I'll let you speak on this more, Brennan spoke to a number of agencies, and the company that gave us the best deal when we were out this money was a company called PodcastOne. They've been in business a long time. From what I can tell, have a very good reputation. They gave us the best deal.
So let me just explain the relationship of PodcastOne to Colin and what probably transpired in the boardroom talks with Brenda. Disclaimer, the only reason I know this stuff is because Jim Cornette talked about it. I'm not just making it up. So Cass Media, owned by Colin Thompson, didn't pay Thick Boy Studio for 8 months. Instead, they used the money to stay afloat until people started to catch on and suing them. At this point, Cass was looming in bankruptcy and it was pretty clear that Bappa wouldn't get his money. Then Colin decides to sell his company to PodcastOne, who was set to make their stock public. So at this point, Colin Colin then proposes a stock deal to Bappa in lieu of cash payments. The deal that was offered to Jim Cornette was 1/3 in cash, 1/3 in cash over 24 months, and the last third in stock over 24 months. So I imagine Brenda got offered something similar, which was obviously a good enough deal for Brenda that he started to suck off everyone over at PodcastOne.
Right, man. But yeah, shout out to CoffeeZilla, shout out to Podcast. Again, I met with everybody in the business. I've been in the business a long time, so I know everybody for the most part. I reached out to everyone when I was like, all right, we're a free agent for the first time in how many years? And Rob, Kit, and Sue at PodcastOne, I was like, this is by far the best team we've met with. By far the best deal. I don't care about any of the other stuff going on. I don't care about any of the other stuff going on. I don't care about any of the other stuff going on.
Now that we know the story of what happened over at Thick Boy Studios, let's hear Theo explain his situation and his response to it.
They tell me that if you come over to our new network, PodcastOne, that we'll pay you some of what you're owed in stock. But the stock hasn't gone public, so they're trying to, it felt like to me, they're trying to leverage our podcast and other podcasts to then make their stock do well. If that happens, then we'll get a share of our money, right? Like the whole thing to me felt really seedy.
Sign me up.
So it was like, yeah, it felt like y'all gonna try to fuck me twice, homie. Well, no, thank you.
Sign me up.
In fact, he stole on our backs once, and I'm not letting these people do it to me 2 times.
Oh my God, sign me up.
I think the difference between Theo and Brenda's response sums up Brendan's character pretty well. Brenda doesn't care as long as he gets some money to keep doing his worthless podcast. And I bet you the biggest reason they signed with PodcastOne was because no one else was offering much money because they see the declining views and failing comedian. Whereas PodcastOne was probably desperate to sign anyone they could to help inflate their stock price, which has dropped 50% in 1 week of being live. Sounds like Mr. Schaub is about to end his Ferrari lease early. Now, I'm not a numbers guy, but here's an article that talks about PodcastOne stocks. Broken! That's the term used on Wall Street to describe a company that goes public, only to see its share price fall rather than go up. PodcastOne has earned that dubious distinction after it went public Friday morning, only to see its share price cut by more than half by the close of market. The stock continues to fall in a new week of trading. Late Monday, shares of PodcastOne fell 22%, trading under $3.40 per share, down from its debut of $8 per share on Friday. So it's Wednesday evening as I record this, and the share is down again to $2.63. My prediction is that it'll be a penny stock within the year, if not sooner. I'm actually pretty interested to see how this is all going to unfold. I think it's pretty clear that the podcast bubble is bursting. The fact that companies were paying $500,000 in advertising for a show that barely breaks 50K in their first 2 weeks is redacted. But let me know in the comments what your prediction is for how long Brenda's going to keep podcasting. My guess is that he'll never stop because that would mean he would have to get a real job, and we know there's no way Mr. Schaub is working a 9 to 5. Like, could you imagine having to work an office job with this asshat? There'd be nicotine pouches all over the floor, he'd have bad breath, drink all the coffee, and act like he runs the place. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more.
I get stressed out. I take nicotine. I did pass out during that crazy time.
Well,
Good.
Yeah. And then we gotta
Good.
But at the end,
Good.
Not
Buddy,
good.
we got money stolen from us, and you had no clue till I told you.
It's dicey because you're rolling the dice.